BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for betting on all the madness. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion. With the largest selection of odds on everything from college basketball to a $200,000 bracket contest, BetOnline continues to be your number one sports betting source. From every Cinderella story to every hat trick, BetOnline has you covered with odds, stats, and more for every game, every play, and every win. BetOnline, the game starts here.
Welcome, everybody, to the Funeral Podcast. Sorry, I mean the Fly Guys Podcast. My name, Justin Goodhart, and this is Cameron Klein, and we are discussing...
Pretty strong about that top 5 pick, brother. I'm pretty strong about it right now.
Hulk Hogan over here, you go. Yeah. Let me tell you, brother, we're going to get that top 5 pick. You know, if at the rate that they're going at, might end up even higher than 5. Yeah, so happy Sunday to everyone out there. It is March 23rd. We're dating this video because the Flyers lost again yesterday. They're now 1-8-1 in their last 10 games. We're hopping right into it. Cameron, first and foremost, actually, no, we're not hopping right into it. How are you doing today on this cold and windy Sunday?
I'm all right. I'm okay. I'm good. Considering how we're starting the show, talking about the Flyers, and they're playing again today in Chicago.
Yes, they are.
Probably going to be uploading this onto, I'm assuming Monday, so that I can get the YouTube video and then the thing together at the same time.
Yeah.
So, it is what it is. But, I'm okay. I don't love that it's cold. Walking out, me and my wife went for a little walk this morning, got a little coffee, got some bagels, and as we're walking out, I said, it's one of those days where you're walking in March. We all go through this in the Northeast. You're walking in March, and you just look at your spouse or your friend or whoever you're walking with, and you just go, this is bullshit, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's bullshit. Because yesterday I was wearing shorts, so I don't know what happened. So that sucks.
Well,
the Flyers suck. It's a sucky week in March, but
what happened?
We'll get through it.
What happened is that we got our fake spring. Northeast people know all about the fake spring. You get to it's usually sometime in March. The weather becomes suddenly. You're in your 60s, the 70s, and it feels great. And then it falls back down because it is March after all. It falls back down into this, 30s, 40s, maybe high 50s feel or low 50s feel. And then you're dealing with that for the next couple weeks and you're thinking, man, I was so cheated. I want to be able to go for walks again. I want to enjoy the outdoors. And then you finally get your spring, right? You get your spring for a week and a half, 2 weeks.
Yep.
And then by early May, it's 450 trillion degrees outside and spring's over. And now you're just going to have to deal with summer that's coming around the corner. Yeah. So if you didn't enjoy your fake spring, fear not. You still do have real spring for 14 days to enjoy. Go buy your spring clothes. But in the meantime, we have to stick with our hoodies here because it's still just a little too cold. And cold is a great keyword for today's game or today's show because the Flyers aren't just cold; they're brick at this point.
Yeah,
falling. Well, let's just talk about the fact that they went 1-6-0 in this homestand, which was bad. But you say to yourself okay, well, at least now I don't have to pretend. Now I can just be okay, now I'm comfortable seeing what's going to happen. And then they have a game against the Lightning, which, they never really, they were never going to win that game. And they have a game against the Capitals where they fall behind 3-0, but they make some, half-hearted attempt to come back. And then they fall behind 2-0 to the Dallas Stars. And then one really good play by Matvei Michkov to get it to Ryan Poehling ties it up at 2. And you're thinking, okay, all right, maybe they'll pull this one out. Maybe they'll beat a good team today.
Yeah.
And then we get to overtime, and the most predictable thing happens, which is the Flyers have not been very good in overtime this year. They fall in overtime to the Dallas Stars. A better team, by the way. A team that's just, should beat the Flyers.
Yeah.
But I think that for this to be the second year in a row of just not just playing poorly at the end of the year, but just to go from kind of a little okay, at least this year, or last year I should say, to bottoming out and collapsing the way they are. 2 years in a row of that, it definitely, it makes me wonder. It makes me think a little bit, Cameron. Makes me ponder what the future Flyers will look like as this team doesn't know how to win in crunch time, doesn't know how to win when the games actually start to matter. but that's okay. We weren't expecting them. We weren't expecting them to win, dude.
Yeah, I know. And I was one of the guys that was saying that, and still do. Going into the season was like, hey, they're still in the rebuild. We cannot forget that. We cannot forget. We cannot have our hopes get through the roof because they're still in the rebuild, and they're still going to be going after draft picks, and they're still going to be not going after big players, and it is what it is. But at the same time, you just get tired of saying that, right? You just get tired of saying like, oh well, it's all right. Doesn't feel all right. Doesn't feel
No,
all right. And I know I don't know, but I'm hopeful, and I have faith that it will be all right. That in the long run things will work out. But I got to be honest, you just really start to think. You start to think about these guys who are supposed to be the future of the team, and
yeah,
no detriment to them. Is just kind of the situations that they've been in. But look at a guy like Jamie Drysdale, young guy, can learn, can do whatever. At the same time, came from the Ducks, went to the Flyers. Hasn't really seen a whole lot of winning in his career, right?
nope.
Owen Tippett, Florida Panthers, in and out of the AHL. You're right. Before he got traded over to Philadelphia, comes over once again. Point is, didn't really see a whole lot of winning. Right, he was gone before they went on the dynasty run that they've kind of been hopeful to be on right now.
Yep.
And yeah, then you talk about the other leaders of the team: Travis Sanheim, Travis Konechny. Well, they've been with the Flyers their entire careers, and we all know what the last 10 years or so has
Not much
been like.
winning.
Just starts to make you think, man. Starts to really
It
make you think. Starts to make you feel less and less hopeful. When you look at the future of the team, you're thinking like, well, if those guys never won anywhere, and I hate saying that because I'm also the mindset of like, well, you can call these guys losers all you want, because once they win, all of a sudden they're no longer losers. Like it's that simple. They're all athletes. They're all great. They're all extremely talented, extremely skilled, and work incredibly hard. But I don't know, man. The hope is not as high up as I'd like it to be, and I can't help but look at a guy like Matthew Michkov and think back to being worried about Claude Giroux. It just reminds me of that.
well,
Well, if they got a guy with them, well, if they got him a goaltender, well, if they had a defense, well, if they yeah, I just don't want to have flashbacks of that.
man, it's such a depressing way to go about like to start the show.
I don't mean to just strand you out on thin ice like that, buddy.
Well,
But
no. I mean,
that's
here's
where
the
my
thing.
mind is at.
Professional sports, I think the hardest thing that young teams have to figure out to do is win. And there's been a lot of examples over the years of a young team that didn't quite know how to win, that had to learn how to win, and once they did learn, then things obviously turned around.
True.
In the NHL, one of the teams that I think of are those Florida Panthers teams that were younger. They hadn't figured out how to do it yet, but they got just a little bit of playoff success in 2022 or 2023 rather, and then things kind of turned around, and then before you know it, they were the Stanley Cup champions.
Right.
With another young team that had to figure out how to win were the Pittsburgh Penguins. That was a team that really had to rebuild it all, and obviously they got a generational
True.
talent. I'm not saying that they didn't, and that doesn't help. They actually got a couple generational talents with Crosby, Malkin, and Fleury, but they still had to learn how to win because
True.
that first season with all of them, it wasn't perfect. But by 2008, they were in the Stanley Cup Finals, and by 2009 they were champions, and it set them on the path that they ended up going on from like really that 2007 to 2018 span.
Yeah.
And the Flyers themselves have they were a younger team back in the 1970s, and they had not figured out how to win yet, but they did. They did end up figuring out how to win. Sometimes you got to bring in a key figure. You got to bring in like a key veteran that is going to be a guy that helps young guys stay afloat, keep their head above water, and believing in themselves.
Yeah. Danny Briere, 2007, 2008, yeah.
But this is an example, though, of how hard it is to win at any professional level, no less the NHL, because the NHL is a league where having one transcendently great player or one franchise player does not a team make. You need to have really, in my opinion, to be successful in the NHL, you have to have at least three really good lines and at least two extremely good defensive pairings,
Yes.
and then at least one goalie who can steal you 10 to 15 games a season.
Yes.
The Flyers have none of that right now. And you look at you mentioned like the players that have come from losing backgrounds. I can take it a step further. The
Oh
only
yeah.
player on this team that I think has seen any winning is maybe Garnet Hathaway when he was a Boston Bruin. But like Rasmus Ristolainen, who's now injured, Buffalo. They
Buffalo,
were not
right?
at no
Say
point when he
less.
was there were they a winning team.
Yeah, say less.
Nick Seeler, I do not think that Nick Seeler came from any winning background. He was with Minnesota for a while. Like that's not, and then he was with Chicago in 2019, 2020. That was the Chicago team that like upset the Oilers as a 12 seed and then got immediately bounced in the next round.
I forgot about that. That's right. Yeah.
And then you look at the rest of the team where it's, Ollie Lexell and Jacob Pelletier and, Igor Zamula. It's young guys that have only experienced losing in their short careers.
Yeah.
And, that is the hardest part about professional sports is learning how to win. It does not help that the Flyers don't have good lines. It does not help the Flyers that they don't have good goalies. And we talked about how in the last episode, like this goalie situation cannot continue. They're going to have to make quite a few changes in the offseason. The bright side about a team being like this is that I don't think any of us sit here outside of like Michkov and maybe a couple of players that you really prefer to stay on the team. No one's married to any of these players.
No.
If I told you tomorrow that the Flyers are going to look to replace Sanheim, York, Sealer, and Tippett and Couturier, I don't think you'd get many Flyers fans that are that upset. They would just probably be like, okay, that's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
I get it. Like that kind of thing.
Yeah, maybe Sanheim people would be upset about, but at the same time, I think it would be what are we getting back? Like it wouldn't be outrage,
I think Travis Sanheim is a great example of a guy who starts out really well in a season. Sanheim hasn't had a point since February 8th.
Hasn't had a goal since December. Hasn't had a goal since December.
That's like December 14th against Minnesota, yeah. And hasn't had a multi-point game since December 7th against Boston. He has gone, I mean, it's March 22nd, guys, so it's not as if to say that
it's been 3 months.
Yeah. It's been 3 months since a goal. It's been almost 2 months since a point.
Yeah, and he's not a detriment on the ice. He's still a good defenseman. He's still, he doesn't look horrible, but right.
Horrible. I don't think he's playing great either. I don't. But then again, no one's playing great. Like you're on a bad team. Who plays great?
Yeah.
So that's the way it's crumbling for the Flyers at this point. Meanwhile, as we look around, Washington was the first team in the Eastern Conference to clinch a playoff berth. They're actually the first team in the NHL to clinch a playoff berth. Ovechkin, I believe, is sitting 7 goals away from history, which is it's going to happen. Maybe not this season. Maybe not. Maybe it'll have to take him into next season. But
it might. I'm kind of starting to think that it's going to take him into next season. Personally.
I think there will be a great annoyance on him if he doesn't just get it done this year. I think that he really wants it to be this year.
I agree
because you're so close. You have 12 games left. You're sitting 7 goals away. You're like, can I score? I've been a goal per game player, like seemingly my whole life. Can I get 7 goals before 12 games conclude? And maybe he can. I'm not too confident in that. Something just tells me other NHL teams may not want to be the one that gives it to him. So
no goalie wants to be the guy. And the other thing too is like he is though the type of player that he's got that psycho mentality, that psycho Russian mentality where I agree with you. Like I don't personally think he's going to get it because 7 goals in 12 games is a lot. But he's a psycho, man. Like he might go into overdrive to try to get this done, and that's just kind of who he's been throughout his entire career. And I wouldn't be shocked if he got it either.
And for what it's worth, the team might go into overdrive to help him try and get there 100%, as well.
100%.
They might be playing with that knowledge. But other than that, the Ottawa, it is looking like this is shocking. We might have 3 teams from the Eastern Conference that are Canadian teams that are good, potentially are going to be making the playoffs.
Pretty cool. It is pretty
honestly.
Cool.
I like that.
Yeah,
the Ottawa Senators have completely changed their season around, and they are looking like that. At this point, it would be just extremely disappointing if they did not make the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
And the Montreal Canadiens have really kicked it up and played a lot better of late, and they're getting points in essentially every game. Teams that have fallen by the wayside, Columbus Blue Jackets and the Detroit Red Wings fell apart, have just completely
Yes.
unraveled with some horrible 10-game stretches. The Islanders have played better of late, and they're in it. They're only 2 points behind the Canadiens. And the Rangers, quietly, the New York Rangers are 1 point out of a playoff spot, but the Canadiens and Senators both have 2 games in hand on the Rangers. So that's probably going to hurt them in the long run, would be my guess.
Yeah, it is.
But
And I don't, it's the Rangers, so I hate them. Obviously, we're a Flyers podcast. We hate the New York Rangers. That's just goes without saying. But at the same time, just go away. Just go away. I'm tired of Matt Rempe. I'm tired of hearing this is old news. A couple weeks ago when they were bitching about how the refs are targeting him. I was like, are you out of your mind? Are you out of your mind? The guy's just sticking his elbow out. He's letting go of his stick to elbow people in the face half the time. Anyway, I don't want to go into too much into it, but also them being sellers of the trade deadline, getting rid of Jonathan Quick, that kind of thing. It's just just go away. Everyone would
because
rather Columbus be there,
you're not winning the cup.
Right. You're not doing anything. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Just go away.
Over in the West, status quo. The Jets are probably going to be the number 1 seed in the Western Conference.
Do you think they're going to get bounced in the first round this year? I feel a little different about this team. I don't know.
They would be playing right now. They would be taking on the St. Louis Blues if it were to all go down like that. And I don't know. The St. Louis Blues have played better of late, and you do have to worry. This is a team. The Jets have not been a team that scores an insane amount of goals. They've been better in goal differential this year, and actually, as I say that, they do lead the Western Conference in goals scored. So I understand that. But, again, in years past, they have not been an offensive dominant team. And in the playoffs last year, they were not an offensive dominant team, despite how great Connor Hellebuck is. The St. Louis Blues have one of those goalies where, if he gets hot, if Jordan Binnington gets really hot, then that's going to be a big problem for you.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's possible that they could get bounced in round 1. I don't think they will. But goalie matchups are a big thing. And who would you rather go up against? Would you rather go up against Jordan Binnington, or would you rather take on a team like, I don't know, in the Calgary Flames that has, Dustin Wolf has been their starting goalie all year, and, he's put up fine enough numbers, but not nearly as polished, I would say, as someone like a Jordan Binnington. Also, that team has Joel Farabee and Morgan Frost, so how much do you really fear an offense like that? And then the Minnesota Wild have, all year long, they've been pretty solid. And they're really putting it together at the end of the year here. They're the only team in the Western Conference sitting in a playoff spot that has a minus goal differential. But they've won 6 of their last 10, and they've had 8 points in the last 10 games. I think that I think the fact that they play super well on the road is a big-time help to that team, because they're going to be playing a lot of road games in the playoffs if they're to make a run.
Oh, yeah, big time. And most likely it's going to end up against teams like Dallas or Colorado, who are just absolute juggernauts. And they were sitting in that third spot pretty much all season until Colorado has went on the run they went on recently, going 8-1-1. And it really does make you it begs the question, right? Mikko Rantanen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, maybe they had a point, right? Send him to Carolina. Carolina, obviously we heard about the whole Rod Brindamore, I didn't want to come here comments and all that kind of stuff. They sent him to Dallas, and Dallas still playing well, 6-2-2, but they're not playing like they just got the biggest superstar in the league, right? Who they just signed to an 8-year contract. It hasn't, to me, been the exclamation point it should have been.
I just wonder, in the case of Mikko Rantanen, obviously he was so great in Colorado, no doubt, super great in Colorado, but he did have Nathan McKinnon that he played with a lot. And I just wonder if Rantanen is a classic number 2. He's the number 2, the second best player on his team, but there's a reason why he's the second best player and he's able to get all these points, because there's a guy that takes up so much more attention. You think of in Washington, Nicholas Backstrom was clearly the Robin to Ovechkin's Batman. But if they had traded Nicholas Backstrom away to a good team, let's just say the Penguins, I'm sure Backstrom makes that team very formidable and good. but is Nicholas Backstrom a needle mover, like the tipping point of a team between making a run, making just a run, and making the run to winning a cup? And I think we might be seeing the same thing with Mikko Rantanen. Is
Yeah,
that he's a good player, but he's not a guy that's going to put your team over the top. He's not a missing link.
he's not. He's not the. Seemingly, he's not the nucleus of the success.
Yeah.
Right. Like he's not where it's coming from. He feeds off of it extremely well.
Mm-hmm. He's a
I would like
cog.
to. Yeah, yeah, a very good one. Like
He's a
made
and
with the finest steel, like it
yeah.
perfectly oiled. It'll never be a problem. And
I
I think
don't want it to seem like we're saying that he's not valuable. He is valuable, but I
right.
think people fancied him as just like a rising superstar in the league.
Yeah,
And when you think of a rising superstar in a league, you think that's a guy that can single-handedly make a good team turn into an elite team. And that
yeah,
may not just be Rantanen. That may just be not his style of play that
yeah.
allows him to take a team to the next level. But if you have a great team around him, he's a guy that contributes and can help you get to that next level.
Right. And I gotta try to find the YouTuber's name, but he broke down a video of why basically his understanding, his reasoning of why Rantanen did not work in Carolina, and it's basically because his style of play, which is just this very east west style. Like when
Mm-hmm.
he doesn't a lot of times doesn't dump the puck in, chase it, right? And that's a Rod Brind'Amour style.
Mm-hmm.
Dump and chase, go after it. He would do this thing where he'll basically almost just go east to west, drop the puck off to somebody else, and it creates a bunch of space. He would move by going east to west, by being off the puck and making the moves he would make off the puck. A lot of times slowly, right? He wouldn't be like churning up ice. He wouldn't be chugging along super hardcore, but he would just kind of be gliding, moving guys around and making other people get open. And to your point, when you have Nathan MacKinnon and when you have Cale Makar as well, right? That's another guy on the ice with you. Other people have to account for those players. So all of a sudden, you getting yourself open is a lot easier. Now,
Yep.
granted, the Dallas Stars have killers too, nothing but killers. Great team. But we're talking about Nathan MacKinnon, who is the bona fide heart leader right now, and Cale Makar, who's probably the best defenseman in the league right now,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's kind of hard to compare those two. And Rantanen, his numbers are good. His numbers are still good. He's still scoring a lot, still offering and helping out the offense a whole lot, creating chances, doing what he does. But it doesn't really seem to be, again, the nucleus of the success of the team. It's just a byproduct of it.
Do
in
you
a way.
think that it's kind of like a Phil Kessel situation, when Kessel was with Toronto and he put up all those gaudy stats, but it never really amounted to much? Do you think that Mikko is kind of like just a kind of like he just puts up the stats, but he doesn't? He doesn't add enough to a team to change things, or do you think that might be a little too harsh to
I
say?
mean, I'd have to honestly go back and try to look at that, but maybe, right? Because Phil Kessel was known as the guy. I mean, obviously you had the memes of the hot dogs and that kind of stuff, but he was known as being, strictly offensive. Wasn't a two-way player, didn't care about being a two-way player. So yeah, like when you would be in Toronto, where all they needed him to be was an offensive player because they were focusing more on defense and stuff at that time, Dion Phaneuf and so on and so forth. And they had Nazem Kadri, other guys who could be those two-way forwards. Yeah, he could just score. He could just
Mm-hmm.
score. And then when he went to Pittsburgh, it was kind of a similar thing. Again, like they didn't need him to go and grind into the corner because they have Sidney Crosby to do that. They have Evgeny Malkin to do that.
He was cannon fodder.
Yeah,
He was a guy that, like, because you look at his season this year, his last two seasons he had a total of 209 points. I'm talking about Mikko Rantanen, obviously. He had 209 points. Right now he's got a total of 74 points this season, which would match his lowest, which is his lowest really since 2020, 2021, where he played only 52 games.
Yeah.
And so, and you want to expand the scale even further, 209 points in the last two seasons, and even before that, he had a 92-point season. So really, over 300 points in 3 seasons. Those are crazy numbers. Those are stupid numbers. That's well over a point per game pace.
Yeah.
And I do think that it's a down year for him, no doubt. It's probably frustrating. And to be fair, he had 64 points in 49 games with Colorado, so still doing that point per game plus type player. But now you've been moved to 2 different cities. You're moving to two different systems. You're learning the teams, obviously how they function. So maybe you're not. Maybe that could also be a part of this whole thing, where you're not as effective immediately because you're still learning how this team functions. It's not. This isn't Colorado. This isn't Carolina.
Right.
Now this is
Right.
Dallas.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't have the Cale McCarr to drop it off to like you normally had to. You don't have. You do have other guys, obviously, but yeah, that could definitely be it. Honestly, it could definitely be it. I'm trying to think who else. I mean, yeah, their team is ridiculous. It is ridiculous, though. But a lot of them are older. I mean, again, Matt Duchene, older guy. Jamie Benn, older guy. I mean, Jason Robertson is one of the best guys he has with him for sure. Kid's a stud. Tyler Seguin has missed majority of this season. I mean, they are a great team, but their offense isn't at the same level as Colorado's is. And yeah, I mean, it's a lot. It's been probably pretty stressful. Also trying to go through a whole contract negotiation over the last, year and a half or so too. So yeah, I think it's probably all those things. There is a very real possibility that the trade doesn't turn into an explosion this year, but next year, 2 years down the line, Mikko Rantanen is a staple in Texas. But
it could be, and this episode ends up looking pretty silly in the grand scheme of things. Like it could look like that.
Add it to the list, though. Add it to the list.
Yeah,
the
we are the ultimate jinxes, aren't we?
Yeah, well, hopefully they sign this guy, and then they do for 3 times as much money as we previously thought. But yeah. I mean, we'll see. I'd like to think that Rantanen would have just, I don't know. I just would have expected them to be a lot higher than they were. The Dallas Stars in general. I was expecting a major explosion. I was expecting them to leapfrog the Winnipeg Jets, and if anything, they're kind of falling behind them even more. So,
yeah, I mean,
the NHL for you.
8 points out with a game in hand. 8 points out. It's unlikely they'll win the division.
Mm-hmm.
It's ironically, if they were in the Pacific, they'd be in first place right now, with Vegas at 90 points, Edmonton at 87. The Kings playing really good hockey at this stage of the season, 85 points. Oh, I mean, when you get Andrei Kuzmenko, it's going to turn everything around.
2-point night, man. 2-point night. Okay, the guy's back. No, but I mentioned off here too. I was like, yeah, the Kings being good. That's fun. That's relevant. I like that. We all kind of like that. I think.
I think because it speaks to my high school self when the Kings were competing with the Chicago Blackhawks regularly for the Western Conference crown.
That's exactly Alec Martinez. Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what I think of.
But yeah, so the playoff picture. I do think this could be a very exciting playoffs because I do think you have good matchups like Toronto and Tampa Bay.
Oh
again. You have Florida versus Ottawa, that would be pretty fun. Washington versus Montreal, which probably wouldn't go too long. But like Carolina, New Jersey. I mean, come on, Montreal's not winning a playoff.
No, Carolina, New Jersey would be really fun. It's a shame because you want Jack Hughes to be there. I believe they should be getting the story is they're getting Dougie Hamilton back. The Devils.
That would be big.
Talk about getting the injury bug at the worst time. I mean, seriously. Losing two of your top
players. It derails a Stanley Cup hopeful into a quick exit to the playoffs, and it leaves the fan base and the organization feeling so jilted because you're just like, that wasn't the Devils. That was just a neutered version of the New Jersey Devils.
Yeah. It's similar to like 2014 for us, like with Steve. Again, I'll always bring it up. I don't give a shit. Chris Kreider going into Steve Mason, and it's just every time I always think of this, and I think I'm like, he was great. He had a 9.45. He had 9.45 in those 4 games. You have him all. You have him all 7. I don't know. I think we're coming out of that. And then who would we play? Oh, we play against Pittsburgh. Okay, the team we beat 5 times that season. I kind of like that matchup. And then who? Oh, Montreal. Oh, the team that we beat 3 times that season. Kind of like that too. And then it's a 1-on-1 with the Kings and played them 2 times this season. 1-1, lost 1, and we won 1 in their stadium. Just saying, man. Just saying. But you don't think about it.
I don't think
they don't haunt you.
I've ever met someone. See, the thing for me is like 2012. If they get through New Jersey in 2012, I genuinely believe they go on to win the Stanley Cup Finals.
Right.
But in 2014, you really were the first person I ever talked to about that season that was like, think about this. If they get through that, if they find a way to beat the Rangers, they have this, and this lined up for them, they probably could have made a run to the Cup. And I'm like, I just think because they lost in the first round, not enough people remember that Flyers team as a good one. You could also go back even further in time. What if they don't have that brawl with Washington?
Oh.
And what if Vinny Lecavalier doesn't mess up his back, right?
12 goals. 12 goals before that game. 8 the rest of the season. 12 goals in like 2 months, and then
What
8 for the next 4.
wasn't the same. He just was not the same player. So
Wayne
yeah, no,
Simmons
listen,
just
I
had to. He just had
injuries
to.
are the ultimate equalizer in every sport, and the NHL is certainly no stranger to that. But regardless, the Devils, if they could find a way to beat the Hurricanes, it would do two things. One, I think it would be a really, really big upset because the Hurricanes
Mm-hmm.
should be the better team.
Yeah.
And
I
again,
think
I
you're
just
seeing
keep.
Rod Brindamore going.
I don't think he would survive. My
Yeah.
next thought. It was just like, is that when the Flyers go, Torts? Okay, you're in senior management.
Dude, I mean, it's between Brindamore, or I mean, you mentioned it earlier when talking about a young team bouncing back. Mike Sullivan. Like,
Sully.
I don't know. I can't imagine Pittsburgh gets rid of him. I mean, obviously their season's in the tank and it's over, but I wouldn't necessarily put that necessarily on him because the team is a lot older and just kind of is what it is. But at the same time, between those two guys, I'd happily. Not that I'm saying Tortorella's gone. I don't want him, but we've been very open about the fact that he could be moving up to upper management as part of in his contract, something that he wants to do.
Yeah.
It could happen, right? And it could happen as early as this offseason. So
I would want a coach. The next coach that would be here, I would want it to be someone that took a young team and brought them to newer heights. And I think that Rod Brindamore, for what he did in those early days with the Carolina Hurricanes, is that type of guy.
yeah,
And people will say, well, he never won. He never even got to a conference final. I understand that.
true.
Andy Reid never won a Super Bowl in Philadelphia. I didn't see the Chiefs necessarily wavering when it came to hiring him as their coach, and that's worked out pretty well for them.
Yeah.
So I think that for the Flyers, if this were to be the last season that John Tortorella is the head coach,
Mm-hmm.
it would do two things to me. One, it would like rob an innocence of me because of just how convinced I was that he was going to be the guy to turn this whole thing around. But the other thing that it would do is it allows them to go look for a coach that is maybe a bit more inspired, hungrier, maybe at this stage of their career. Maybe they're not like, Torts is almost 70 years old if he's not already there. So like obviously he's at the older stage of his coaching career. And then hopefully get someone that's just like, is better for younger players. I will also say this about Torts because we talk about like him moving into senior management. A great coach moving into upper management is not a guarantee to be a good thing either.
No.
And look no further than down in Nashville, where Barry Trotz is anything but a great executive in Nashville.
And it's weird because he started there as an executive and was very good at it when they first became a team. They were like, we want him. He was in their front office and he did good. He was a good scout. He was a great scout. So yeah, perplexing.
Definitely perplexing.
For sure.
Unfortunate for sure. But yeah, so
I guess they didn't have any vacations to cancel this year.
No.
Or any concerts. It was a concert, right? Wasn't it last year that they were all excited about? And he came in the room, done, canceled, not happening.
God.
And then they just made a playoff run. Like it worked.
They were fun last year too. That was a good Nashville team last year. Not so much this year.
No.
All right.
Oh, dude, I mean, talking about bad goaltending. Jesus. UC Soros 292, 897. I mean,
especially after they inked him to like $1 billion and like for the next 100 years, and then he turns into an absolute pumpkin out there. But as it's a lazy Sunday, Cameron. Obviously, not a whole lot going on. The Flyers, like we said, they take on the Blackhawks later today. We'll see how they do. And I was mentioning it to you before we hopped on. Had a late night last night, working at Penn State Harrisburg. Get home, what's the first thing I do? I throw on good old Nintendo Entertainment System.
I love that you say the whole thing. The Nintendo Entertainment System.
I know. It's the NES, but in case people don't recognize what I'm saying immediately, I can just enunciate the whole thing.
Yeah.
But I told you I put on Tecmo Bowl, which I had played a little bit before, but I hadn't like given it like a serious time because I was never a big fan of Nintendo sports games to begin with.
Yeah.
And I'm playing it, and I know what the golden rule is of which team you should play as, but I wanted to try other teams first. So I tried Indianapolis, I tried Miami, I tried Seattle, I tried Chicago. None of that worked. None of that was going well for me. And I was like, all right, let's just see if this is all it's cracked up to be. You go and become the Raiders. The Raiders.
Yeah.
And the first play I call is just like a simple halfback run with number 34,
Just
Bo
halfback dive.
Jackson.
There it is. Halfback dive.
And I think I was at the 30-yard line. I went 70 yards for a touchdown, and he just blazed by everyone. And I said, why would anyone ever play this game and not immediately be just the Raiders so they can just run? You don't even have to pass as the Raiders. It's just hand it off to Bo Jackson. Oh, and if you don't want to hand it to Bo Jackson, Marcus Allen's also not a bad. They make Marcus
Right.
Allen pretty damn good in that game as well.
Well, he was a great running back too. That's like what's so bananas.
I
Like
know
they were both ridiculously good.
But he spent so much of his later years as a Raider as a backup because he ticked off Al Davis. And they made him a fullback. They made him like the third down back. He's in the Hall of Fame. They had him on the practice squad at one point.
It is funny because the discussion in sports up in Massachusetts has been largely about ownership because the Celtics just got sold. So it is funny bringing up Al Davis because we were talking, me and some radio buddies were talking about some of the worst owners in history, and that Al Davis not as bad, right? And then but toward his later years, again, like Jerry Jones,
bad in his later years, yeah.
Jerry Jones in his later years, that kind of thing. But anyway, just fun conversation. Bo Jackson, though, I got to be honest, to take it away from Technoball and put it into real life for a second, like to me, one of the biggest tragedies in sports was him not being able to stay healthy his entire life, and
on such a weird play too. Like you watch him go down in that playoff game against Cincinnati. I personally don't think anything of it. Like it looks so innocent. He just falls down.
Yeah.
And then little do we know that it's the hip. The hip's just destroyed.
It's wild because I remember in his 30 for 30 documentary, they were theorizing that essentially he basically pulled his own leg out of his socket. And they're theorizing that essentially like what made him obviously such a freak athlete and so amazingly talented and strong is what ultimately hurt him, right? That he gets wrapped up, and to get out of this tackle, he goes to explode like he always has. And that explosion, which made him the great running back and great athlete he was, is the same type of explosion of energy that popped it right out and ended his career, which is wild to think about. But when you watch some of the highlights of him, when you hear some of the stories of him from his like high school coach about him jumping over cars and like he's such a conundrum in sports, and he will always be that because you never actually fully got to see what he could be entirely. So he's always going to be this kind of legend.
It's actually kind of good for Bo's legend that he got hurt, because we sit here going, oh my God, he would have been the greatest player ever. We never got to see what Bo Jackson looked like on his decline. We only ever saw him in his prime. It's similar to Barry Sanders. Like when Barry retired, he was coming off what they called a down year for Barry Sanders. He had 1,400 rushing yards. That was a down year for Barry Sanders. So I agree. The whole thing with Bo is very sad, and the Raiders did not recover from him going down.
No,
because by that point, I think they had brought in the guys like Eric Dickerson, even when they still had Marcus Allen on set. But then Marcus Allen moves on to the Kansas City Chiefs, and the Raiders would be searching for like a good running back and a good offense for the next 12 years of their franchise. They didn't really become good again until Rich Gannon got the revival under John Gruden.
Yeah,
but so the point is, of course, Tecmo Bowl it's a fun game. If any of you still have it out there and you can pop that sucker in, do it. I definitely really enjoy it. I love playing those old NES games. They're just so much fun to play. I know I talked about it on the show before. They're just so much fun.
No, but there's a charm to them. And obviously we're older. We're showing our age here, where it's like that's what we grew up with, and like we like old stuff. But there's a charm to them, and there was a simplicity to them that I think is what is kind of not lost, but what you're after, right?
Yep.
So like when I play like Mario 64, it's the graphics aren't amazing. You're not doing it. The engine isn't insane. Like it's not some great new whatever, but there's something about simply just going out and getting a star. And that's it. And you can kind of just turn everything else off and just be like, well, we got a double jump here, double jump twist, jump onto the Falcon, ride it, wait till it gets around. Like something about shutting off the rest of the bullshit out of your brain and just being like, this is what I need to focus on right now. It's deeply relaxing, and it's
Nintendo 64, the game that I remember playing as a young kid was Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, because my brother had played Ocarina of Time,
Mm.
and then they came out with another game, Majora's Mask,
Yeah,
which
all
is kind
time
of like a
great.
cult hit. Like some people think it's the greatest one ever. Other people don't really like it as much.
Yeah, a lot
It
of
was,
debate. Yeah.
it was fun. It was a fun game to play. But I mean, when Nintendo was in their heyday, they came out with some really fun games. Pokemon Battle Stadium 2
All
was
time great.
just so much fun.
Little fun story about that. My dad did the Christmas story little trick with my brother for Christmas that year, where my brother opened up all his presents, got all these things that he was like. My dad was like, "Yeah, you liked what you got," and he was like, "Yeah, well, super nice kid, very polite."
Christmas
And then he
story type
and then he
situation
was just
here.
like, "What? What's that? What's that over there?" And then it was Pokemon Stadium. Another great game though.
Oh
Yeah,
gosh.
awesome game. You also the fact you could plug in your Game Boy and put in your Pokemon into it.
Yep.
Oh, dude, yeah, it was
They
the best.
Nintendo was very ahead of its time, and now they're
Mm-hmm.
not ahead of their time anymore. But that's neither here nor there.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but yeah, so Cameron, because this is obviously going to be a bit of a shorter episode today, because obviously there's not nearly as much to talk about.
I
Before
mean,
we
they're
go though,
losing. I don't.
yeah, like the fire stinks,
we
so
yeah
there's not
yeah.
as much to talk about. But before we wrap up this episode, I also want to talk to you about something that has been on my mind, something that happened, another one of these Justin stories that leaves you kind of scratching your head. So,
My favorite. These are my favorite.
so I I was sent a form to fill out, like a census form for the township that I'm in, right?
Okay. Okay.
And I'm reading the form. And it's like, we need these numbers to figure out, for like our school district and all that stuff. And I'm like, don't lie to me. Don't lie to me. I know what this is about. I fill out the census, and then I'm gonna get like a tax, like from my township in a few
Right.
months after that.
Right.
So
Yeah. You're an adult. You've played this game. Yep.
I
Yeah.
played this game.
Mm-hmm.
So I fill it out because you have to. And there's a drop off mailbox at the end of the street. But there's something about this mailbox that I find peculiar. One, it's attached to a piece of sidewalk, which is detached from the sidewalk itself. It's just this like this hanging out piece of concrete.
Okay.
And the mailbox is like really torn up. It's a really torn up mailbox. Like the door that you'd have to open to collect all the mail is like dented and bent, so like it wouldn't be like protected from rain and all that stuff. And it's has like the faded collection times. Point being is that it's still there, so you'd think, I guess, they come around and collect the mail, but it looks so bad enough to the point where I'm not convinced that maybe it is.
Right. Yeah. And you don't want to drop the thing in there, and then it doesn't go where it needs to go, and then it becomes some shit for you. Right. Okay. All right.
But
I'm with
that's
you.
exactly what I did.
Um.
Because I can say, you have this mailbox here. If it's not being used, then why is it still here? Why am I being penalized? I didn't do anything wrong.
I love it.
So either they're
father-
gonna either they'll get it, and because I did my civic duty,
Yeah.
or they won't, and it won't be my fault. Blame the post office. Have them come collect this stupid thing.
My father would be so proud of you in that move.
Yeah,
He would do. He would do the. He'd. Dad never skipped on bills. Okay, I'm going to throw that out there.
No.
But he'd do the thing where sometimes you forget sometimes it's February, right? And things are happening 2 days earlier than they normally happen, right? And he would just do the thing where maybe he forgot to send the check or whatever, so he goes, "I'm going to send it that day when it's already due today, right? Already, but forgot, whatever. Send it that day, and then when I see I get the late fee, I just call and say like, no, I put that in the mail. It's in the mail. I don't know what to tell you. We'll give it a day. Give it like a day or two. And sure enough, it would show up. And they would be like, yeah, well, we'll take it off for it. Classic move.
That's beautiful.
But it's a beauty of just being like, not my problem.
Did I ever tell you my my pulled over story in Shippensburg?
No, I don't think so. No, you told me the one after the Eagles Super Bowl. That one.
Yeah, that one. But no. This was when we were seniors, and I was driving my then girlfriend, because it was her 21st birthday, so she had like some of her friends. I think it was like these 2 other girls they worked at the newspaper, the Slate.
Yeah, and this was in town, right? In Shippensburg.
This is in town, yeah. So
for those that don't know, very very small town and college town, and the cops, the police there act like they do in a small town.
Yeah,
they're bored. They're bored. Fair enough. fair enough. So
But I picked her and her friends up from Wibbs, and it was like probably like 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, something like that.
I mean, the best club, that side of the whatever river is in
As long as you
Harrisburg.
didn't have the pizza, I agree. Then yeah, you were fine. Can't have the pizza there though.
It was,
And so we're driving home, and so I think it was at one point she was living on Queen Street, and obviously the listeners don't know where Queen Street is, but you know where Queen Street is.
Yes, right. Yeah, this is a very specific moment. It's a very niche moment in a very niche podcast right now. Yeah. Okay.
Most people have tuned out by now. Don't worry. And so I make that right on red at that light.
Okay.
But apparently you're not supposed to. I didn't see the sign.
Oh, yeah, you're not. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I remember. I know exactly what you're talking about because same thing. I got pulled over there, not on a night, but yeah, same thing.
Yeah. So I get pulled over, and I'm like, what did I do? Like, I all I did was make a right on red. And so the cop, it was a female cop, she comes up to my window, and my first question is like, "Good evening, officer. What did I do?" Like, just
right.
And then she immediately said, "She goes, you made a right on red. That's an illegal right." And I just like kind of threw my head back, like, oh. And then immediately she's obviously, because I have 3 drunk people in my car, she goes, smells an awful lot like alcohol in here. And I'm like, I know, I'm the designated driver. Like I'm just taking these people home. And she wasn't buying it necessarily. So she has me get out of the car, and I got my first ever breathalyzer test.
In her defense, like, yeah, it's college town.
No, you have to. You have to. I'm not blaming her. She was actually a really nice officer, because for what happens in a minute. So she's having me follow her finger, and I was obviously like, I hadn't drank anything, but I was still jittery. I was still like really nervous.
You're nervous, yeah.
And
adrenaline's pumping through your veins.
She goes, "You're really shaking here, sir." And I'm like, I'm very nervous. That's what this is. And so she has me do the breathalyzer test. I do it. She's like, "Okay, you can go back to your car." And I'm like, "Am I good?" She goes, "You can go back to your car now, sir." I was like, "All right." So I walk back to the car, and I'm sitting there for a few minutes, and she walks up to the car. She stops, and she looks at my car. And then she comes up. She's like, "Who in your family's a police officer?" And I'm like, "What?" And then it hit me. There's a fraternal order of police from Philadelphia's police district on my car, because my family, when they bought the car, was from a cop. And that sticker.
Oh my God, that's right. I remember that. Yeah. Yes, I remember that. Yeah.
In my mind, I'm like, you better come up with an answer.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah, Officer Walt. I'm not going to say the last name, but like Officer Walt, whatever, which is my cousin, my dad's first cousin, whose name I went with. And it's just like, the reason I went with it was because that sounds like an officer's name, right? Like if you were going to be a police officer, that's the name you would have. And I was like, from 1980 to 2016 was a police officer. Completely made up.
I feel like she also didn't need to know. She just was like, you could have just been like, "Oh, my uncle." Like, she would have been like, "Oh yeah."
I thought I needed to be very detailed, because that's who I am.
He had brown eyes and a crew cut. Like,
so
okay,
that happens, and then obviously I passed my breath because I hadn't had anything to drink.
Right.
So this officer leans into the window and scolds my girlfriend and her 2 friends for basically, like, I don't know, getting me in trouble or something like that, even though it was my fault. And like these 3 drunk girls are just like, they're like, "I can't believe that she yelled at us." And the whole time I'm like, this is awesome. They get yelled at. I didn't even get a ticket because I was the DD, and you cannot ticket a designated driver, in my opinion, because it completely defeats the purpose.
Yeah, I agree.
So I did that, and I go home, and I eventually tell my dad, I'm like, this is what happened. This is how I got out of it. And he looks at me, he's just like, he goes, "You lied to the police." I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Good job." He's like, "Good." He goes, "That's actually really good work." He goes, "You'll have to tell Walt about this."
I love how you're like, yeah, isn't it great?
It was fantastic.
It's so funny because I remember getting pulled over. I wasn't driving, but it was a similar thing. We were at the that diner that's on that corner.
Yep.
I think it's on the corner. I want to say Prince Street. I could be wrong. I know it's on King Street, the main street, and then
no. I think you're right. I think it does intersect with Prince.
I think it was King and Prince, but and it was the same thing. Same, like we were out drinking, and my buddy's girlfriend at the time was the one driving. She had not been drinking. She actually picked us up from wherever we were. I can't remember exactly, but and then we went from there. Oh, it was a party. It was a Halloween party, I believe. We went from there to the diner, just hanging out at the diner, and then as we were leaving, Same exact thing. Made the right on red. We got pulled over and went through the whole. They didn't breathalyze her, but same thing. And it was also a female cop. Given that it was a small town, would not be surprised if it was the same exact officer.
I was gonna say, do you happen to remember if the cop had long or short hair?
I think it was like done up in a ponytail, so I couldn't
Okay,
tell.
all right.
Couldn't tell if it was short or long. It could have been. It
Because
could
I
have
had
been
like
either.
the cop I had, it was an older female with like shorter hair.
Okay, it might have been. It might
Yeah.
have been. But I remember
But
she let us go because she had been drinking. And also a little fun fact: I learned this listening to 93.3 WMR Preston and Steve. For the old school. For the fans out there in Philadelphia that know, greatest radio show in
I was going to
the
say
country.
it's the best radio show in Philadelphia's history, at least.
Arguably the country. But yeah, so they were talking about DUIs one time, and a cop called in, and he said with the finger thing, what they're looking for, and he's like, we're not looking for you to follow the finger necessarily, like they are, because if you can't do that, then you're screwed no matter what. What they're looking for is that when you get over to your peripherals and your eyes are all the way over, if you're intoxicated, your pupils bounce. Something you can't control.
Oh, really?
And it's something that it's like that. So when they go all the way over, it's not to see if you can follow it necessarily. It's to see if your pupils are bouncing. If they're bouncing, you can follow the thing all day long. They got you. They know.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was interesting. Where it's just like you're not gonna. He basically was just like, for cops that have been doing it for a long time, you're not gonna fool them.
I was going to say,
if you're drinking,
you have no
you're gonna
problem.
know.
You have no problem saying that, like on air, telling people like this is what we look for, because you just said you can't control that. That's not something that you can get down.
And then I started thinking about like every time since that I have been intoxicated, I do think like when you look in your peripherals, it almost looks like, I don't know, maybe it's just a placebo thing in my head, but like when I'm looking, it almost looks like it's just vibrating more than normal. I don't know. Could just
you know
be
what
myself.
you do realize that the next time I'm extremely inebriated, I'm going to like just start looking to my left and my right and just be like, do I feel like a vibration? Do I feel like I'm bouncing right now? Like that's
Dude, it'll be a fun thing to do up in the mountains, in between innings.
just as long as no one's driving, of course.
Right,
like
yeah.
do not drive and be an idiot.
You're at your back porch smoking a cigar. We're in between innings, pitching changes happening. Let's see. Can I, let's see.
The Phillies are down 6-1 against the Padres. I'm just going to go ahead and, start moving my pupils left to right to see if I feel a vibration.
Let's check if I'm drunk enough for this. No, I'm not. All right, no. But before we go off, I do want to just toss out there, because I think the only thing that we could really be talking about is just prospects, right? At this point, Tankathon. Broad Street Hockey YouTube channel. Subscribe to it because it's rad. We're on there. Everyone else is on there, and they also have a lot of short-term videos as well. And Kyle from Broad Street is also doing a bunch of things about just prospects. He had a video, I think, earlier this week about Hunter McDonald.
Yep.
Really, really good work. Thomas Williams also had a little bit of linking, making a video about the link between Carson Dorwart from Michigan State as well, who I've been watching a little bit of the NCAA because I figured what else am I doing? And also, it's big up here. Obviously, Boston College, Boston University, University of Maine. They just won their conference championship.
Yep.
And their tournament is starting on Thursday. They're the Division I NCAA tournament. Carson Dorwart from Michigan State, number 2 seed. One of the best teams and one of the better players on that team. A guy who might sign in Philadelphia. Will be really fun to watch. So head up the YouTube channel. Check out those videos for the few things that are actually interesting going on with the Flyers.
Well, also, Thomas Williams wrote an article about Yegor Zavargin, who is one of the best KHL goaltenders right now. He's only 19 years old.
Where have you heard that before?
I know. I really hope
when the Russian kid comes over here, it'll be different.
Yeah, well, one Russian does make a difference. The other Russian, not so much since he's been here. But he's 19 years old with no high expectations. He played in 6 games and earned a .941 save percentage with SKA St. Petersburg, and then 35 appearances later, Zavargin has now earned a .911 save percentage with a .260 goals against average. So good numbers, and obviously, like we've talked about before, the KHL is no slouch league. Obviously, there's a lot of differences, but he has definitely, look good. Mm-hmm. He's only 19, so he's got plenty of time to continue to get better and develop, because God knows the Flyers can't develop a goalie if their lives depended on it. But compared to how other goalies have been, in total, Zabergan's goals against average is 2.54 with a 9.17 save percentage. If you compare it to other goalies who have made the trek from the KHL to the NHL, Ilya Samsonov, 2.13 goals against average, 9.36 save percentage. Pretty good. And Samsonov's a pretty good goalie.
Yeah, I was
Sergei
going to say, like,
Bobrovsky,
yeah.
needing no introduction, 2.49 goals against average and a 9.27 save percentage. But Zabergan, interestingly enough, of all the goalies that were listed here in this article by Thomas, he had played the most games at 41, where the next closest was Sergei Ivanov in last year. He played 36 games and had a 2.52 with a 9.30. So, needless to say, there are some prospects. Hunter McDonald, Yegor Zabergan. Obviously, people are still high on Oliver Bunk and all that for what he's doing. So there's things.
Gurbankin again from Toronto scored that.
Gurbankin,
We never mentioned it on here, but it's already known. He scored that goal, that shootout goal, or that breakaway goal. Looked gorgeous. There is hope, as much as we just talk all day about how there isn't.
There's hope, but just remember, guys, we're like 2 to 3 years away. Just remember that. Like we're 2 to 3 years away from being 2 to 3 years away. And according to that AI thing that was posted the other day that I saw, Flyers aren't going to win a cup till 2055. By that point, the Quebec Nordiques and Arizona Coyotes will have risen from the ashes to win a cup before we do.
Can't wait to see it.
Can't wait to see it either.
Can't wait. I actually do I would like the Nordiques to come back. That'd be pretty
and the
cool.
Hartford Whalers.
Yeah, 2 of the greatest logos in NHL history. Yeah,
ever.
Yeah.
Bring them back.
It's a shame.
For the Fly Guys podcast, my name is Justin Goodard. This has been Cameron Klein. Thank you so much for listening. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Fly Guys Podcast, on Instagram at Fly Guys Podcast. Be sure to also check out all of the other amazing articles that Broad Street Hockey has out right now. On top of the prospect checks, there's also some coverage on what Jet Luchenko has been doing. Obviously, takeaways from what's going on with the Flyer season, how they did against the Capitals, game previews today against the Blackhawks. Obviously, by the time you listen to this, you either read that preview or you can go back and read it to give it, cross-reference, see how the game actually went.
Right.
But be happy, be healthy. As always, the Fly Guys podcast is presented by Bet Online. Let's go, Flyers.